The ledger didn't balance. $3,000 missing from the week's take. Not stolen by outsiders. Not lost to bad bets or police raids. Just gone. From the inside. Bumpy Johnson sat in his office on a Thursday night, staring at numbers that told a story nobody wanted to hear. Someone in his inner circle was stealing. Someone he trusted. Someone who ate at his table. Someone who called him family. For 20 years, Bumpy had built his empire on loyalty. On the understanding that betrayal meant death. Not eventual death. Not negotiated consequences. Immediate. Final. Absolute. He had 48 hours before the next collection. 48 hours to identify the traitor. To confirm the theft. To deliver justice that would remind everyone why loyalty wasn't optional. By Saturday night, 3 men would wish they'd never taken that money. And everyone in Harlem would understand. You don't betray Bumpy Johnson. Not ever. Not for any reason. Not if you want to see Sunday. Harlem in 1955 was Bumpy Johnson's kingdom. Not through violence alone. Through organization. Through systems that moved money, managed risk, and rewarded loyalty. His numbers operation employed hundreds. Runners collected bets across the neighborhood. Controllers processed the money. Bankers held the funds. And at the center, Bumpy's inner circle. 12 men who'd been with him for years. Some since the beginning. They knew everything. The locations. The codes. The schedules. They had access to money, information, power. They were trusted because they'd earned it. Through years of service. Through demonstrated loyalty. Through moments when they could have betrayed him and chose not to. That trust was sacred. It was the foundation of everything Bumpy had built. Without it, the empire collapsed. Everyone stole. Everyone betrayed. Everyone pursued their own interests above the collective. Bumpy had always been clear about the rules. You could make mistakes. Could lose money through bad judgment or bad luck. Could fail at tasks or miss opportunities. Those things were forgivable. But stealing? Betrayal? Those were different. Those struck at the heart of what made the organization function. Those demanded consequences so severe that nobody would ever consider them again. The inner circle understood this. They'd seen what happened to outsiders who crossed Bumpy, had witnessed the calculated brutality, had helped dispose of bodies, had delivered messages to families. They knew the price, which made the theft more shocking, more personal, more unforgivable. Someone who knew better had done it anyway, had decided $3,000 was worth their life, had calculated that they could get away with it, had forgotten who they were dealing with. The missing money was discovered during a routine audit. Bumpy reviewed the books every Thursday, checked collections against payouts, verified that numbers matched expectations. This week, they didn't. The discrepancy was subtle, spread across multiple locations, designed to look like natural variance. Random losses. Bad weeks. But Bumpy saw the pattern. Saw that specific collection points were consistently short. Saw that the timing suggested coordination. Saw that this wasn't random. It was systematic. Professional. Planned. Which meant someone with knowledge. Someone with access. Someone inside. He called an emergency meeting. Just the inner circle. Told them about the shortage. Watched their faces. Looking for tells. For guilt. For fear that went beyond normal concern. He saw nothing obvious. Everyone expressed shock. Anger. Promises to investigate. Vows to find the responsible party. But someone was lying. Someone was performing. Someone was sitting in that room knowing they'd been caught. Knowing that Bumpy was 3 steps ahead. Knowing their time was running out. Bumpy gave them a deadline. 48 hours. By Saturday night, I want answers. I want the money returned. I want the person responsible identified. I want this handled. He didn't say what would happen if it wasn't. Didn't need to. Everyone knew. The meeting ended. The 12 men dispersed. Some to investigate. Some to worry. One to panic. Because the traitor understood something the others didn't. Bumpy already knew. The meeting wasn't about discovery. It was about giving them a chance. A final opportunity to confess. To return the money. To beg for mercy that probably wouldn't come. 48 hours. 2 days to make the choice. Come clean or double down. Confess or run. Face justice or face something worse. Friday morning arrived with tension thick enough to cut. The inner circle split into teams. Investigating. Questioning runners. Reviewing collection records. Looking for evidence of who'd stolen from the family. But Bumpy was already 3 moves ahead. He'd known about the theft for 2 weeks. Had been watching. Waiting. Building evidence. Identifying not just the thief, but the entire network. Because $3,000 didn't disappear without help, without coordination, without multiple people looking the other way. The main thief was a man named Marcus Webb, one of Bumpy's controllers, responsible for processing money from the East Harlem territory. He'd been with the organization for 8 years, started as a runner, worked his way up through competence and apparent loyalty. Bumpy had trusted him, had given him responsibility, had included him in the inner circle. Marcus had a gambling problem. Not obvious, not public, but serious. He owed money to a bookie in the Bronx. Italian connected, dangerous people. He'd try to handle it quietly, borrowing from friends, selling possessions. But the debt kept growing, interest compounding, threats escalating. So he'd made a choice. Steal from Bumpy. Just a little. Just enough to clear the debt. Then stop. Return to being loyal. Pretend it never happened. But stealing was like any other addiction. The first time was hardest. After that, easier. Justified. Rationalized. He'd taken 100 here, 200 there. Small amounts spread across weeks. Amounts that looked like normal variance. Bad luck. Poor collections. Except Bumpy's system was too sophisticated for that. Too carefully designed. Every collection point had historical data, expected ranges, statistical norms. When Marcus's territory consistently underperformed, flags went up. When the variance exceeded probability, investigation began. When patterns emerged, conclusions formed. Bumpy had confirmed the theft 10 days ago, had traced the money, had identified Marcus as the primary thief. But he'd waited, watching, because thieves rarely worked alone. Marcus needed help. Someone to adjust the books. Someone to verify false numbers. Someone to provide cover when questions arose. That someone was Thomas Reed, another inner circle member. Bumpy's bookkeeper, the man who reconciled accounts, who certified that collections matched expectations, who had the authority to make adjustments look legitimate. Thomas wasn't stealing for himself. He was being paid $500 from Marcus for every week the theft went unnoticed. It was less than his share of what Marcus stole, but it was guaranteed. Safe. No risk beyond getting caught. Except Thomas had miscalculated, had underestimated Bumpy's attention to detail, had assumed that small numbers wouldn't trigger scrutiny, had forgotten that in Bumpy's world, trust was verified constantly, that loyalty was tested regularly, that nothing went unnoticed forever. The third person was more surprising. Calvin Price, one of Bumpy's enforcers, a man responsible for security, for protecting the operation, for ensuring nothing like this could happen. He wasn't involved in the theft directly, but he knew, had discovered it 3 weeks ago during his own investigation. And instead of reporting it, he'd made a deal. Keep quiet. Let it continue. Take a cut. $1,000 to look the other way. It was the worst kind of betrayal. Not stealing directly, but enabling it. Protecting thieves. Subverting the very systems he was supposed to enforce. Friday afternoon, Bumpy called them in separately. Marcus first. To his office. Alone. How's East Harlem? Bumpy asked. Casual. Conversational. Marcus relaxed slightly. Good. Collections are steady. Numbers are solid. Any problems? Any issues I should know about? Marcus shook his head. Nothing serious. Just the usual. Some runners are slow. Some territories are down. But overall, we're on track. Bumpy nodded. Appeared satisfied. Good. Keep it up. Let me know if anything changes. Marcus left. Relieved. Thinking he'd passed some kind of test. Thinking Bumpy suspected nothing. He was wrong. Thomas came next. Same questions. Same casual tone. Same false reassurance. Books are clean, Thomas reported. Everything balances. No discrepancies worth mentioning. You sure? Bumpy asked. You know how important accurate numbers are? How much I rely on your reports. I'm sure. I triple-check everything. If there was a problem, I'd catch it. Another lie. Another confirmation of guilt. Another nail in his coffin. Calvin was last. The enforcer. The protector. Security's tight? Bumpy asked. Calvin nodded. Tighter than ever. No issues. No threats. Nobody's stealing. Nobody's talking to cops. Everything's solid. You'd tell me if something was wrong? If someone inside was compromised? Absolutely. That's my job. To protect the organization. To catch problems before they become disasters. The irony was thick. The man responsible for catching thieves was protecting them. For money. For personal gain. For reasons that would cost him everything. By Friday evening, all three had lied to Bumpy's face. had chosen to double down instead of confess, had sealed their fates. Bumpy gathered his most trusted lieutenants. Not the inner circle. A different group. Men whose loyalty was beyond question. Jericho, Willie, Nat. 3 enforcers who'd been with him from the beginning. Who'd killed for him. Who'd die for him. Marcus Webb, Thomas Reed, Calvin Price. They've been stealing. For weeks. Coordinated. Systematic. They just lied to me. To my face. All 3 of them. He laid out the evidence. Bank records showing Marcus's debt. Ledgers proving Thomas's adjustments. Surveillance footage of Calvin meeting with Marcus. Everything documented. Everything confirmed. Tomorrow night, Bumpy said. We handle this. All 3. Simultaneously. Public enough to send a message. Private enough to avoid police attention. Clean. Professional. Final. The lieutenants nodded. They'd done this before. Knew the protocol. Knew what Bumpy expected. One more thing, Bumpy added. I want the rest of the inner circle watching. I want them to see what happens. To understand. To remember. So nobody ever thinks about doing this again. It was psychological warfare. Making the punishment visible. Making the consequences real. Making loyalty not just expected but terrified of being absent. 24 hours remained. One day for the guilty to run. To confess. To somehow change the outcome they'd already determined. None of them would. Because they still thought they might get away with it. Still thought Bumpy might not know. Still thought loyalty could be faked if performance was good enough. Saturday morning arrived. Marcus, Thomas, and Calvin went about their normal routines. Unaware that their last day had begun. Unaware that everything had been discovered. Unaware that by midnight, they'd understand the true cost of betrayal. Saturday unfolded like any normal day. Collections happened. Money moved. The organization operated smoothly. But underneath the surface, preparations were being made. Jericho identified locations. 3 different places. Isolated. Controllable. Where the confrontations could happen without witnesses. Without interference. Without complications. Willie arranged transportation. Vehicles positioned. Routes planned. Escape paths identified. Everything timed to the minute. Nat assembled the enforcement team. 6 men beyond the 3 lieutenants. All reliable. All experienced. All understanding that tonight required absolute precision. Bumpy spent the day in his office. Reviewing the evidence one final time. Making sure nothing was missed. Nothing assumed. Nothing left to chance. Because once this began, there was no going back. No mercy. No negotiation. Just consequences. At 4 o'clock, he called a meeting. The entire inner circle. All 12 men. Including the 3 traitors. They gathered in the back room of one of Bumpy's clubs. Confused. Uncertain why they'd been summoned. Bumpy entered last. Closed the door. Looked at each face. I called you here because we're family, he began. His voice was calm. Almost gentle. For years, we've built something together. Something that requires absolute trust. Absolute loyalty. The room was silent. Attentive. When that trust breaks, everything breaks. The organization. The relationships. The future. Everything. He paused. Let the words settle. I gave someone 48 hours. 48 hours to come forward. To confess. To make this right. That time is almost up. Marcus's heart started racing. Thomas's hands began sweating. Calvin's jaw clenched. But they said nothing. Showed nothing. Still hoping. Still believing they might survive. I know who stole from us, Bumpy continued. I know how. I know why. I know everything. I've known for 2 weeks. The room temperature dropped. Every man looked at the others. Trying to identify the guilty. Trying to distance themselves. I'm giving one final chance. Right now. In front of everyone. Confess. Return the money. Face consequences that might be survivable. Or stay silent. And face something much worse. 30 seconds passed. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Marcus couldn't. Admitting it meant death. Thomas calculated. Confession meant implicating others. Calvin rationalized. Maybe Bumpy was bluffing. Maybe this was a test. The silence continued. Became oppressive. Became its own verdict. All right, Bumpy said. His voice hadn't changed. Still calm. Still controlled. Tonight, each of you will receive instructions. A location. A time. Come alone. This is not optional. This is not negotiable. Anyone who doesn't show up will be hunted. Anyone who runs will be found. Everyone will be there. Everyone will understand. He left. The meeting ended. The 12 men dispersed. 9 confused. 3 terrified. At 7 o'clock, messages were delivered. Separate locations. Separate times. Each inner circle member received instructions to witness, to observe, to learn. Marcus received his message at 7:30. A warehouse in the Bronx. 9 o'clock. He considered running, taking what money he had, fleeing the city, starting over somewhere Bumpy couldn't reach. But he knew better. Bumpy's network extended everywhere. Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere safe. So he went, walked into the warehouse. Alone, as instructed. Inside, the 9 other inner circle members waited, standing in a semicircle, watching. Bumpy stood in the center. Jericho and Willie flanked him. Marcus Webb, Bumpy said, "You stole $3,000. Over 6 weeks. You falsified reports. You lied to me. Multiple times. Do you deny this?" Marcus's voice cracked. "I can explain. I had debts. I was going to pay it back. I just needed time. Do you deny stealing?" Bumpy interrupted. Marcus looked at the floor. "No. Do you deny lying to me yesterday? To my face? When I gave you a chance to confess?" "No." The admission hung in the air. Final. Irreversible. "You had 8 years, Bumpy said. 8 years of loyalty, of trust, of being part of something bigger than yourself. You threw it away for $3,000. For debts you could have come to me about. For problems we could have solved together." He gestured. 2 men grabbed Marcus. Held him. Not gently. Not violently. Just firm. Immovable. "Everyone here needs to see this," Bumpy said. Not to Marcus. To the witnesses. Needs to understand. Needs to remember. What happened next took 3 minutes. Professional. Brutal. Designed to hurt without killing. To punish without mercy. To demonstrate consequences. When it ended, Marcus was conscious. Barely. Broken. Financially ruined. Everything he'd built was gone. His position. His income. His place in the organization. He was escorted out. Dumped in an alley. Alive but destroyed. A message. At 9:30, Thomas Reed received his summons. Different warehouse. Same setup. Same witnesses. Some of the same inner circle members. Others who hadn't seen Marcus. All understanding they were about to witness something significant. Thomas entered. Saw Bumpy. Saw the witnesses. Knew immediately this was the end. "Thomas Reed, you falsified books. You took bribes. You enabled theft. You betrayed every principle this organization stands for. Do you deny this?" Thomas tried calculation. Tried negotiation. "I can give you names. Other people who are stealing. Information you need. Do you deny what you did?" Bumpy's voice cut through the attempt. Thomas shook his head. No. His punishment was worse than Marcus's. Because bookkeepers betrayed trust at a deeper level. Had access to everything. Could have stolen millions if they'd wanted. The fact that he'd only taken bribes didn't matter. The capability was what counted. When Thomas was carried out, the witnesses understood. Betrayal had levels. Consequences matched severity. At 10 o'clock, Calvin Price arrived at his designated location. He knew what was coming. Had heard about Marcus and Thomas through the network. Through whispers. Through the fear spreading across the organization. Calvin had been an enforcer. Had delivered punishment. Had understood the rules. Had violated them anyway. His confrontation was shortest. "You knew about the theft. You protected the thieves. You took money to betray your own responsibility. You're worse than them. They stole money. You stole trust." Calvin had no defense. No explanation. No excuse worth offering. His punishment reflected that. Harsher than the others. More complete. More devastating. When all 3 were done, when the witnesses had seen everything, Bumpy addressed them all. This is what betrayal costs. Not just for the betrayer, but for everyone who enabled it. Everyone who knew and stayed silent. Everyone who put personal gain above collective loyalty. He looked at each face, making sure they understood. You're family, but family has rules. Break them, and you're not family anymore. You're just another problem to solve. The witnesses dispersed. Shaken. Educated. Terrified of ever making similar choices. 48 hours had passed. 3 men had paid. The message was delivered. Loyalty wasn't optional. It was survival. Sunday morning brought silence. The kind that follows violence. The kind where everyone knows something happened, but nobody speaks about it. Marcus Webb was in a hospital. Under a false name. No police report. Just injuries that would heal slowly. Painfully. Reminding him daily of his choices. Thomas Reed had disappeared. Not dead. Worse. Exiled. Blacklisted. His name spread through every criminal organization in New York. Marked as a traitor. As someone who falsified books. Who took bribes. Who couldn't be trusted. He'd never work in the underworld again. Calvin Price was found by police on Monday. Beaten. Broken. Telling them nothing. Because talking to cops after what happened would be suicide. He took his punishment. Served time for assault when they arrested him for fighting back. Never mentioned Bumpy's name. Never explained what really happened. The inner circle gathered that Sunday. 9 men now. 3 spaces empty. Permanent vacancies. Bumpy addressed them in his office. His tone was different. Not angry. Not threatening. Just factual. What happened this weekend wasn't about revenge. It was about standards. About maintaining what we've built. About making sure everyone understands the cost of betrayal. The 9 men nodded. Still processing. Still shaken. I didn't enjoy it. Didn't take pleasure in it. But it was necessary. You all need to know that. Need to understand that loyalty isn't just expected. It's required. It's the foundation of everything. He paused. Let them absorb that. But I also failed. I trusted without verifying. I assumed loyalty without testing it. I let small signs go unnoticed until they became big problems. That's on me. It was unexpected. Bumpy taking responsibility. Acknowledging his role. Going forward, things change. More oversight. More verification. More systems to catch problems early. Before they require this kind of response. The 9 men looked relieved. Understanding that Bumpy wasn't blaming them. Wasn't suspicious of everyone. Just implementing better controls. But understand this. If you're ever in trouble. If you ever need money. If you ever face problems that seem unsolvable. Come to me. Talk to me. Let me help. Because stealing is never the answer. Betrayal is never necessary. There's always another way. It was mercy mixed with warning. Compassion balanced with consequences. The meeting ended. The organization continued. But something had changed. The inner circle was smaller. More careful. More aware that trust was earned daily. That loyalty was tested constantly. That consequences were real. Word spread through Harlem. Through the underworld. Through every organization that did business with Bumpy. 3 men had betrayed him. Within 48 hours, all 3 had paid. The efficiency was noted. The brutality was whispered about. The message was received. Young criminals learned. Older bosses nodded with understanding. Law enforcement added notes to files. Everyone recognized what had happened. Bumpy Johnson had reinforced the rules. Had demonstrated that his empire wasn't built on fear alone, but on standards. On expectations. On consequences that were promised and delivered. The 3 empty chairs in his inner circle remained empty for months. Not because qualified people didn't exist, but because Bumpy wanted the absence visible. Wanted everyone to see the cost. Wanted the empty spaces to remind people what happened when trust broke. Eventually, new members were recruited. Carefully. Slowly. With more vetting. More testing. More verification that loyalty was genuine. The organization grew stronger. More resilient. More careful. Better protected against internal threats. But Bumpy never forgot those 48 hours. Never forgot the feeling of betrayal. Never forgot that the people closest to you could hurt you most. It changed him. Made him more cautious. More systematic. More reliant on verification than trust. Some called it paranoia. Others called it wisdom. Bumpy called it survival. The real climax came 3 weeks later, when the full impact became clear. Marcus Webb tried to rebuild his life. Found legitimate work. Warehouse job. Minimum wage. Nothing like what he'd had. His gambling debts remained. The bookie in the Bronx didn't care about his problems. Didn't care that he'd been beaten. Didn't care that he'd lost everything. Just wanted his money. Marcus couldn't pay. Couldn't even make interest payments. The threats escalated. He went to Bumpy. Desperate. Broken. Begging for help. For mercy. For one more chance. Bumpy received him in the same office where this had started. Looked at the man who'd stolen from him. Who'd lied to him. Who'd betrayed everything they'd built together. You want me to help you? Bumpy asked. His voice was neutral. Not angry. Not sympathetic. Just curious. Marcus nodded. Unable to speak. Unable to articulate what he needed. You stole from me. Lied to me. Chose money over loyalty. And now you want help. I have nowhere else to go, Marcus whispered. Nobody else to turn to. They're going to kill me. Please. Bumpy considered this. The irony. The desperation. The complete reversal of power. I could help you. Could pay your debt. Could make this problem disappear. But why would I? What have you done to earn that? Marcus had no answer. Nothing to offer. No reason Bumpy should help beyond basic humanity. Here's what I'll do, Bumpy said finally. I'll pay half your debt. $5,000. The other half is yours to figure out. Work. Save. Beg. I don't care. But I'm giving you a chance to survive. Not because you deserve it. Because I'm not the kind of man who watches someone die when I could prevent it. He leaned forward. But understand. This is the last time. The last favor. The last moment of mercy. After this, you're on your own. Forever. We're done. You don't contact me. Don't ask for anything. Don't use my name. You're a ghost. Do you understand? Marcus understood. Took the money. Paid down his debt. Worked off the rest over 2 years. Lived quietly. Gratefully. Never forgetting the mercy he didn't deserve. Thomas Reed never came back. Never tried. He'd left New York the night of his beating. Went to Philadelphia. Then Baltimore. Then further south. Tried to start over. But his reputation followed. Nobody would hire a bookkeeper who'd been caught falsifying records. Nobody would trust a man who'd taken bribes. He ended up doing manual labor. Construction. Day work. Barely surviving. His skills useless. His experience worthless. His choices defining him forever. He died in 1972. Liver failure. Alone. Forgotten by everyone except those who'd known him in Harlem. Who remembered him as a cautionary tale. Calvin Price served 3 years. Got out in 1958. Tried to return to the life. To find work as an enforcer. But word had spread. He'd failed his responsibilities. Had protected thieves. Had been caught and beaten. Nobody wanted him. Nobody trusted him. He left the criminal world. Became a security guard. Ironic profession for someone who'd failed to provide security. He worked that job until retirement. Never speaking about his past. Never explaining the scars. Never admitting what he'd lost. The inner circle members who'd witnessed the punishments never forgot. Some became more loyal. More careful. More dedicated to avoiding similar fates. Others left the organization. Decided the standards were too high. The consequences too severe. The pressure too intense. Bumpy let them go. Understanding that fear-based loyalty was temporary. That real loyalty came from respect mixed with understanding. That you couldn't force people to be trustworthy. You could only create environments where betrayal was irrational. The 48 hours became legend. In Harlem. In the underworld. In the stories told to new recruits and young criminals. About the time Bumpy Johnson discovered betrayal and responded with precision. About how 3 men paid within 2 days. About how loyalty wasn't just expected but enforced. The legend grew. Details changed. Some versions claimed Bumpy killed all 3. Others said he'd tortured them for days. A few insisted he'd made them fight each other. The truth was simpler. More measured. More devastating in its restraint. He'd broken them without killing them. Had destroyed their futures without ending their lives. Had sent a message that didn't require bodies. Just broken men serving as living warnings. That was the real genius. That was what made it legendary. Not the violence, but the calculation, the precision, the understanding that sometimes the cruelest punishment is survival with consequences. The years following the betrayal reshaped Bumpy's organization fundamentally. The empty chairs were eventually filled, but the process changed. New members underwent months of vetting, background checks through multiple sources, tests of loyalty that seemed random but weren't, situations designed to reveal character under pressure. Bumpy implemented systems that made betrayal harder, dual verification on all money, random audits without warning, cross-checks between departments. No single person controlled enough to steal significantly. It was bureaucracy applied to crime. Boring, tedious, but effective. The organization's efficiency actually improved. Because good people didn't mind oversight, didn't resist verification, understood that protection benefited everyone. Only thieves feared transparency. The story of the 48 hours spread beyond New York. Chicago heard it. Detroit. Los Angeles. Every major city with organized crime. Other bosses took note. Some implemented similar systems. Others dismissed it as paranoia. Those who dismissed it often learned the same lesson Bumpy had. That betrayal from within was inevitable. That trust without verification was naive. That consequences needed to be swift and memorable. By 1960, 5 years after the incident, Bumpy's organization was stronger than ever. More profitable. More stable. More resilient. The betrayal had been expensive. But the lessons were priceless. Frank Costello visited that year. They sat in Bumpy's office, discussing business, territories, opportunities. I heard about what happened in 55, Costello said. With your inner circle. That was handled well. Professionally. Bumpy nodded. Didn't elaborate. Most men would have killed them immediately. Made examples through bodies. You did something smarter. Made examples through broken lives. Death is easy, Bumpy said. It's final. It's done. But living with consequences? That's harder. That's a message that keeps delivering itself. Costello smiled. Understanding. Appreciating the strategy. You know what impressed me most? You took responsibility. Admitted you'd failed to catch it earlier. That takes character. It was true. I should have seen the signs. Should have verified instead of trusted. Should have built better systems. But you fixed it. That's what matters. Most bosses just blame everyone else. You looked at yourself first. It was respect between equals. Between men who understood that power required constant maintenance, constant attention, constant willingness to adapt. Malcolm X heard the story in 1963. Someone told him during a conversation about black leadership, about power, about standards. Bumpy Johnson caught betrayal in his organization. They said, 48 hours later, everyone involved paid. No mercy, no hesitation, just consequences. Malcolm thought about that, about the parallel to his own situation, about loyalty and betrayal in movements, in organizations, in struggles for justice. What did he do? Malcolm asked. They told him about the investigation, the confrontations, the punishments, the broken men serving as warnings. He didn't kill them? Malcolm was surprised. He destroyed them. That's different. That's smarter. Dead men become martyrs. Broken men become cautionary tales. Malcolm understood, filed it away, used similar thinking in his own work. About accountability, about consequences, about maintaining standards. The FBI noted the incident in their Bumpy Johnson file, added pages about organizational structure, about loyalty enforcement, about how he maintained control. They were impressed despite themselves, despite being on the opposite side, despite wanting to bring him down. Subject demonstrates sophisticated management capabilities, one report stated. Responds to internal threats with calculated precision. Maintains loyalty through combination of reward and consequence. Organization shows remarkable resilience. It was acknowledgement that Bumpy operated at levels most criminals never reached, that his empire lasted because of intelligence, because of systems, because of standards ruthlessly enforced. Young Harlem residents heard the story, learned from it. Some became more loyal to their own organizations, understanding that betrayal had costs. Others became more careful, more aware that actions had consequences. That trust was earned and could be lost. The 3 empty chairs remained empty for 6 months, then filled slowly, one at a time. Each new member understood they were replacing someone, understood why those positions had opened, understood the standards they needed to meet. The implicit message was clear. You're not irreplaceable. Positions continue. Organizations survive. Betray us, and you'll be erased. Replaced. Forgotten except as warning. By 1965, 10 years after the betrayal, new members of the inner circle didn't know the full story. Just whispered versions. Legends about 3 men who'd stolen, who'd paid within 48 hours, who'd never been seen in Harlem again. The accuracy didn't matter. The lesson did. Loyalty wasn't optional. Consequences were certain. Standards were enforced. Bumpy Johnson died in 1968, 13 years after the betrayal. His organization had survived longer than most, had thrived when others collapsed, had maintained standards when others compromised. The 48 hours became part of his legacy. Not the most famous story, not the most dramatic, but perhaps the most instructive. About how he operated, how he thought, how he balanced mercy with justice. At his funeral, 9 of the original Inner Circle members attended. The ones who'd witnessed the confrontations, who'd learned the lessons, who'd remained loyal through everything that followed. They didn't speak about that weekend, didn't reminisce about the betrayal, just carried the memory, the understanding, the knowledge that they'd seen something significant. Marcus Webb heard about the death, considered attending, decided against it. He'd been given mercy he didn't deserve, given a chance to survive. But he wasn't family anymore, wasn't welcome, wasn't part of the community that gathered to mourn. He sent flowers instead, anonymously, with no card, no message. Just acknowledgement that Bumpy had saved his life even after he'd betrayed him. Thomas Reed was already gone, had died 2 years earlier, never reconciling with Bumpy, never finding redemption, just fading away in a southern city where nobody knew his name. Calvin Price attended from a distance, standing at the back, not approaching the family, not claiming connection, just paying respects to a man who'd taught him the most expensive lesson of his life. After the service, younger criminals discussed Bumpy's legacy, his wars, his partnerships, his victories. Someone mentioned the betrayal story. "Is that true?" a young man asked. "Did he really handle 3 traitors in 48 hours?" An older man nodded. "True. I was there. Saw it happen. Saw what he did to them. Saw how he made them examples without killing them. Why not just kill them? Send a clearer message." The older man smiled. Because Bumpy understood something most people don't. Death is easy to dismiss, to rationalize, to forget. But broken men, men whose lives were destroyed, they're walking reminders, living proof of consequences. You see them years later, working minimum wage, living in poverty, and you remember. You understand. The young man absorbed this, understanding that real power wasn't about violence. It was about intelligence, about strategy, about consequences that lasted. In the decades that followed, the story evolved. Some details were forgotten, others were embellished, but the core remained. Bumpy Johnson caught betrayal, responded within 48 hours, made everyone involved pay, made everyone watching understand. Loyalty wasn't negotiable. By the 1980s, young drug dealers studied Bumpy's methods, how he'd organized, how he'd managed, how he'd enforced standards. The betrayal story was taught as business school case study, about organizational security, about internal threats, about balancing trust with verification. By the 2000s, hip-hop artists referenced him in lyrics, in interviews, in conversations about Black entrepreneurship and power. The 48 Hours story resonated, about swift justice, about accountability, about maintaining standards in organizations. In 2020, 55 years after the betrayal, a historian interviewed the last surviving witness, one of the original Inner Circle members, 93 years old, memory fading but still sharp about that weekend. People ask if Bumpy was ruthless, the old man said. If he was cruel, if he enjoyed hurting people. He wasn't. He didn't. It wasn't about pleasure. It was about standards, about building something that lasted, about protecting hundreds of people who depended on him. The historian asked about the 3 men. What happened to them ultimately? Marcus survived, got old, died grateful Bumpy had spared him. Thomas died alone. Calvin lived with regret. None of them ever forgot. None of them ever forgave themselves. And Bumpy carried it too. Carried the knowledge that he'd trusted wrong, that he'd failed to see what was happening, that 3 men he'd considered family had betrayed him. It changed him, made him more careful, more systematic, better at running things, but also sadder, more aware that betrayal was always possible, that trust was always temporary. The interview ended. The historian compiled his research, published a book about Harlem's criminal history. The betrayal story was one chapter, well documented, carefully researched, respectfully told. But the real story wasn't in books, wasn't in documentaries, wasn't in official records. It was in memory, in the lessons passed down, in the understanding that some men operate at different levels, that some organizations maintain standards others abandon, that some leaders enforce consequences others just threaten. Bumpy Johnson caught betrayal on a Thursday. By Saturday, everyone paid. Not because he was cruel, because he was serious. About loyalty, about standards, about building something worth protecting. The 48 Hours proved it, demonstrated it, made it undeniable. And everyone who heard the story understood. You don't betray Bumpy Johnson. Not if you value your future. Not if you want to keep what you've built. Not if you understand that some consequences last forever, even when you survive them.